I will start off with a statement on the decision issued by the court, by the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The Secretary General takes note of the order of the International Court of Justice indicating provisional measures in the case of South Africa against Israel on the application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. In that regard, the Secretary General notes that the court's decision to order Israel, among other things, in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, to, and I quote, to take all measures within its power, and quote, in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, to prevent the commission of acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, including killing, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the group's destruction, and imposing measures intended to prevent births. He also notes that the court's instructions to Israel to ensure with immediate effect that its military do not commit any of these acts. Further, the Secretary General takes special note of the court's order to Israel to ensure the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in Gaza. He also notes that the emphasis of the court that, and I quote, all parties to the conflict in the Gaza Strip are bound by international humanitarian law, end quote, and that it calls for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages abducted during the attacks in Israel on October 7th and held since then by Hamas and other groups, end quote. The Secretary General recalls that pursuant to the Charter and to the statute of the court, decisions of the court are binding, and trusts that all parties will duly comply with the order from the court. In accordance with the statute of the International Court of Justice, the Secretary General will promptly transmit the notice of the provisional measures ordered by the court to the Security Council. And that lengthy statement is being shared with you via email. Also this morning regarding UNRWA, as I said in a statement issued earlier this morning, the Secretary General has been briefed by the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, regarding extremely serious allegations which implicate several UNRWA staff members in the terror attacks of October 7th in Israel. The Secretary General is horrified by this news and asked Mr. Lazzarini to investigate this matter swiftly and to ensure that any UNRWA employee shown to have participated or abetted in what transpired on October 7th or in any other criminal activity be terminated immediately and referred for potential criminal prosecution. An urgent and comprehensive independent review of UNRWA will be conducted, as it has been announced by Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, back on 17 January. To protect the agency's ability to deliver humanitarian assistance, Commissioner General Lazzarini has taken the decision to immediately terminate the contracts of all these staff members and launch an investigation in order to establish the truth without delay. Any employee of UNRWA who is involved in acts of terror will be held accountable, including through criminal prosecution. And I can tell you that our colleagues at OIOS, the Office for Internal Oversight Investigation Services, have been seized of the matter and will be conducting the investigation at UNRWA's request. Turning to the situation in Gaza, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that heavy fighting was reported yesterday in Khan Yunis near the Al-Aqsa, Nasser, and Al-Amal and Al-Khair hospitals. There have also been reports of Palestinians trying to flee to the southern towns of Rafah, which is already overcrowded despite the lack of safe passage. The head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, said yesterday WHO and UNRWA helped evacuate 45 patients from the Khan Yunis training center, but was unable to evacuate all of the injured due to the fighting. One patient reportedly died en route. Dr. Tedros called for the protection of all civilians, humanitarians, and health workers, while reiterating his appeal for an immediate ceasefire. WHO also says there are 14 partially functional hospitals out of 36 in Gaza, 7 in the north and 7 in the south. And in Lebanon, the humanitarian coordinator for Lebanon for the United Nations, Imran Riza, said today that the escalation of the south of the country is taking a growing toll on civilians. Mr. Riza's statement came after he recently visited the southern parts of Lebanon and met with people who have lost their homes and are now displaced because of the current round of hostilities. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimates that more than 86,000 people have been displaced in southern Lebanon, while some 60,000 are remaining in border villages. Significant damage was inflicted upon health centers, essential civilian infrastructure, and agricultural land. We reiterate our call on all the parties to take constant care to spare civilian and civilian infrastructure and to facilitate access to civilians in need in line with international humanitarian law. Back here this morning, you will have heard the Secretary General speak at the annual ceremony in remembrance of the victims and survivors of the Holocaust, and particularly recognize their courage. He said that the beacons of bravery shone from the hell of Auschwitz itself and from across the world ravaged by Nazi ideology and hate. The Secretary General warned that the anti-Semitism that fueled the Holocaust did not start with the Nazis, nor did it end with their defeat. Today, he said, we are witnessing hate spreading at alarming speed. Online, it has moved from the margins to the mainstream. Mr. Guterres said, it is up to all of us to defend the truth and to defend our common humanity. Working together, he said, we must combat online lies and hate. Every one of us must resolve to stand up against the forces of hate, discrimination, and division. A couple of travel notices to share with you. Our Deputy Secretary General Mina Mohammed, at the invitation of the Prime Minister of Italy, will head to Rome to participate in the Italy-Africa Summit, hosted by the government of Italy as part of its G7 presidency's focus. The Deputy Secretary General will also engage in bilateral meetings with senior government officials, UN officials, and other stakeholders. The Deputy Secretary General will be back in New York on the 29th of this month. And on Cyprus, the newly named personal envoy of the Secretary General in Cyprus, Maria Angela Holgun-Cuellar, will travel to Cyprus over the weekend for her first visit to the island since taking up her mandate earlier this month. On 30th January, she will meet with the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot leaders, Mr. Nikos Christodoulidis and Mr. Ersin Tatar, respectively. During her stay, Ms. Holgun will also engage with a broad range of interlocutors, from local actors to civil society, including women and youth groups. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian coordinator there, Denise Brown, today issued a statement condemning a new attack on humanitarian workers in Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region, that's in the eastern part of Ukraine. This morning, a vehicle belonging to a Ukrainian humanitarian organization called the Mission Proliska was hit while its team was just a few meters away distributing supplies. While civilians in Chasiv Yar have exhausted their scarce resources, Ms. Brown stressed the importance of the work carried out by volunteers, humanitarian organizations, and local authorities. She emphasized that the work of humanitarian organizations must be protected. And the High Commissioner for Refugee, Filippo Grandi, wrapped up a week-long visit to Ukraine late last night. He warned of dramatic humanitarian suffering throughout Ukraine and worsening conditions as war-affected civilians suffer the depth of winter. Mr. Grandi appealed in the strongest terms for much more international humanitarian support to the country, including to those displaced by the horrific violence and those who are subject to harsh winter. In the past 2 years, the Office of High Commissioner for Refugees and its partners have reached more than 4.3 million people in 2022 and 2.6 million in 2023 with assistance and support. If funding is available, UNHCR plans to deliver almost $600 million worth of assistance to reach 2.7 Ukrainians in 2024. Also on Ukraine, as you know, yesterday Security Council held a meeting on threats to international peace and security. Briefing the council was Rosemary DiCarlo, the head of our peace building and political affairs department. She said that the United Nations is not in a position to verify the reports or the circumstances of the crash of a Russian Ilyushin 76 military transport plane in the Belgorod region of the Russian Federation, near the border of Ukraine. Her remarks were shared with you. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our peacekeeping colleagues there report that peacekeepers have deployed to the Mweso area in North Kivu to protect civilians who are caught in ongoing clashes between Congolese armed forces and the March 23 movement, so-called M23. The mission has received reports of several civilians killed and wounded. Peacekeepers are actively protecting a corridor which has allowed more than 1,000 internally displaced people to move to safer grounds. The peacekeeping mission is monitoring the situation closely and remains committed to implementing its protection of civilians mandate in support to the Congolese defense and security forces. Turning to Mali, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the 2024 Humanitarian Response Plan was launched yesterday in Bamako. That's the capital of Mali. We, along with our humanitarian partners, will need over $700 million to assist more than 4.1 million people across the country in 2024. The efforts will complement the response activities implemented by national authorities. Last year, aid agencies received only about 30% of what was needed, and we had asked for $750 million last year. With these funds, they assisted more than 1.8 million people across the country. While funding is urgently needed, aid agencies are also clear that humanitarian aid is not the solution to challenges facing Mali. We continue to emphasize the need to maintain development assistance as well as social cohesion programs to help communities keep moving forward and avoid further increases of humanitarian needs in the future. Today is the first day of International Clean Energy. In his message, the Secretary General said that fossil fuel phase-out is not only necessary, it is inevitable. He adds that we need governments to accelerate the transition to the biggest emitters should point the way. I'm almost done. Senior personnel appointment. Today, the Secretary General is appointing our friend Rezidon Zenenga of Zimbabwe as his new Deputy Special Representative for the UN Assistance Mission in Somalia. He succeeds Anita Kiki Gebeho of Ghana, to whom the Secretary General is very grateful for her dedicated service to the UN in Somalia. Mr. Zenenga currently serves as the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General in Libya, where he also worked as the Assistant Secretary General Mission Coordinator for the Support Mission since 2020. Mr. Zenenga brings extensive experience in supporting political processes, mediation, managing complex peace operations, and working with governments and other key stakeholders in conflict and post-conflict areas, and we congratulate Ray. Lastly, on a roll, we thank our friends in Algiers, in Baku, in Bratislava, and in Funafuti. Where is Funafuti? Tuvalu. Yes, close enough, Edie. It is Tuvalu. So we thank our friends in Algeria, in Azerbaijan, in Slovakia, and in Tuvalu for making it to the honor roll. Edie, you came as close as anyone else.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of questions. First, on the Secretary General's statement in reaction to the International Court of Justice ruling. He either takes note or takes special note, but a lot of the decisions of the court are things that the Secretary General himself has called for and been calling for. So why is the language so weak?
The language isn't weak, it's legal. The bottom line for this Secretary General, as we've said, believes that the court is, it's not that he believes, it is a pillar of the UN system, it's a major organ. He strongly believes that its decisions should be respected as they are binding by the charter and the statute of the court, and his position, and he believes in the independence of the court, so he's not a court commentator. I mean, you're correct that he has been calling for a humanitarian ceasefire. He's been calling for the respect of international law. He's been calling for the release of hostages. That was his position yesterday. It's his position today, and will continue to be his position.
Okay, and my second question is on the UNRWA announcement. It talks about several UNRWA employees. Why can't we get an exact number? Several usually deals with like under 5. So are we talking about under 5 employees? Are we talking about more? And why not give a specific number?
That is the information I have from UNRWA right now. As more information we can share, we will share that with you.
And is the OIOS planning to send investigators to the region?
I mean, OIS will do what it needs to do. I mean, they literally received the assignment very early this morning. They will do as thorough job as they always do. Madame.
Hi, Steph. I have several questions as well. Just a follow-up on the number. The U.S. State Department said 12. So do you confirm or not?
The U.S. State Department said what it said. I said what I said. I have no more information to share with you at this point.
Okay. On the State Department at the same time announced that they are suspending funding to UNRWA because of these allegations until the UN is doing what it needs to do to solve the issue. So what is your reaction to the suspension of the funding with UNRWA being already underfunded?
I know the U.S. authorities are in touch directly with UNRWA. UNRWA launched an appeal, if you'll recall, not too long ago for Gaza for about $481 million. That was at the end of December. They've received about $280 million so far, and I think plus an additional $90 million was received for urgent needs. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza who rely on UNRWA's humanitarian work, who rely on humanitarian assistance, even more now than they did before. It is the work that UNRWA does remains critical today, and we very much hope that while UNRWA that a number of things have to happen at the same time. UNRWA has to ask OIOS to do this investigation. The Commissioner General, I think, has taken very swift and strong measures right away. At the same time, our humanitarian work needs to continue. Lives depend on it.
Sorry, I have more.
Oh, yeah.
At the Holocaust ceremony this morning, the Israeli ambassador was very, very strong against the UN after this UNRWA issue, saying that the UN is not only weaponized to delegitimize the existence of Israel, but also to physically exterminate us. So any comment regarding this?
I'm not. I was there at the ceremony. It was an extremely solemn ceremony, honoring the memory of millions of Jews, of Sinti and Roma and LGBT people and other minorities who were targeted just because of who they were. I think the Secretary General delivered a very strong and solemn speech, and I'm not going to décortiquer the remarks of others.
Last one, if I may. On a different topic, another court issue. The High Court in Nairobi blocked the deployment of the mission to Haiti, saying it's unconstitutional. Even if the Kenyan government is going to appeal the decision, it could take, I guess, a long time now. So is the mission dead? Is the Secretary General going to try to find another country to lead the mission to replace Kenya?
You know, it wasn't... We did not, it was not the Secretary General that designated Kenya. It was the Kenyan authorities that stepped forward, as you well pointed out, and we thank them for doing so when so many countries are not stepping forward. As you said, they will appeal. the need for this multinational force authorized by the Council remains extremely high. We need urgent action, we need urgent funding, and we hope that member states will continue to do their part and then some. Gabriel, then Deji.
Thanks, Steph. Several questions. Some have already been asked, so I'll try to skip ahead here. On UNRWA, there's some reporting that the Secretary General had a phone conversation with Antony Blinken yesterday about the UNRWA situation. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay. And to be abundantly clear, is the UN investigating these allegations, or does the UN found evidence that the allegations could be true?
We have UNRWA, and I would refer you back to their statement, the Commissioner General has received enough information to have taken a decision on separating a number, firing a number of staff members. I'm not going to go more into it at this point.
Okay, that's a little vague, but okay. Fair enough. I'll move on. Sorry, one more on UNRWA. There's one more report that the Shin Bet and Israeli military intelligence gave evidence that UNRWA vehicles and facilities were used during the October 7th attack. Does the UN have any evidence of that?
I'm not able to answer that question at this point.
Okay, last one, and I move on. About the ICJ, is the Secretary General disappointed that the ICJ did not call for a ceasefire?
You know, as I said to Edie, the Secretary General is not here to do color commentating on decisions of the independent court of the UN. His position has been what it is. It's been very clear. We've taken note and special note of everything that the court has decided.
The Foreign Minister of South Africa said that she does not think, I'm paraphrasing, she does not think that the injunctions laid out by the ICJ can be carried out without a ceasefire. It's like trying to put a square peg through a round hole. Does the Secretary General think that the provisions can be carried out with no ceasefire?
What the Secretary General thinks and what he would like to see is an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Deji.
Some of my questions have been asked by my colleagues, so I'll just try to get some
And
others.
answered.
Yes, you answered, but not clearly. So let me try it one more time. On UNRWA, you just skipped the number of people. In your statement, you said some of the alleged UNRWA staff were in the October 7th attack. What does that mean? Are they participated? Are they were they planning for that? Were they like what does that mean?
I understand your position in trying to get more detail. I think the UNRWA statement as issued is as clear as they can be at this time.
So there would be a more detailed report?
It is as clear, I mean, it is, they are as clear as they can be at this time.
So how much damage to the UN of the reputation as well as financially speaking does this event would do to
that's
the
not
UN?
for me to
Let me change the question. How
that's not for me to assess. But you know what I think I will paraphrase what Mr. Lazzarini said in his statement, which is I think those staff members who betray the values and the ideals enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations betray not only their colleagues but all of the people we serve around the world.
My next question on the ICJ ruling today. Gabriel just asked about the ceasefire. I'm just wondering, will the Secretary General walk back from the ceasefire urges or appealing? He will still ask for immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
I don't think the Secretary General at this. No, I was trying to say something a little.
So his position
and
would
witty,
still
but
be
the
consistent.
Secretary General's strong and clear position
Is
is for a humanitarian ceasefire, for obvious reasons from our part. Sinan. Okay, Dulcie and then Stefano. Yep.
Okay, thanks. So when did the Israelis make these allegations known to the UN?
I have not, let me just put it this way, the further questions should be addressed to UNRWA. I've shared with you whatever I can share at this point.
You can't tell me when they actually emailed or notified?
I can tell you that the Secretary General was briefed earlier this week by Philippe Lazzarini, but for other details, you should reach out to UNRWA.
So it might have been earlier this week.
I can't tell you what I don't know. I can't speculate on what I don't know.
Okay, so Sigrid Kaag, there's no dedicated website to her work so far, right?
Nope. I mean, she is what I can be her website and tell you that she's currently in Amman. She is working, continuing her contacts, and that she will be in New York at the end of January, I think, to be there January 30th to brief the Security Council.
Okay, so that's when she's filing her report on January 30th?
That's when she has to report back to the council, and she will do that on 30th of January.
And she'll be here physically?
Yes, ma'am. That's the plan. You, please.
Thank you, Steph. So I have follow-up
You were
question
asleep.
about UNRWA.
Yep.
So, UN has already terminated their contract or not yet? Because if UN terminated their contract, it means UN confirmed something.
I don't want to go further than what UNRWA said, but obviously, if decisions were taken by UNRWA, it was based on information they have. Yep.
On Wednesday, the Russian parliament, Duma, passed in the first reading a bill on confiscation of property, in particular for spreading fakes about the Russian army and the calling for activities against the security of the state. In other words, if a person in the Russian Federation publicly reads the UN General Assembly resolutions on Russia's occupation of Ukraine or the Secretary General's statements on this issue, he or she will be imprisoned and have their property confiscated. Do you have any concerns about that?
I hadn't seen that report, but I can tell you that we traditionally do not comment on bills that are being debated within a parliament that are not yet adopted. Mr. Vaccaro, did you have a question? I don't want to prompt one, but if you have one, I'm happy to take one.
No, I do actually. Thank you. Many have been asked, but as one of my colleagues said, I'm not completely satisfied with your answer, so we will try it again. About exactly, okay, if I understood, UNRWA tells Guterres, the Secretary General, of what's going on, what they discovered. The Israeli intelligence gave the information to UNRWA or gave it to Guterres?
You're speculating on information that I don't have.
Okay. Then the question is important about when happened. I mean, when UNRWA talks to Guterres, because we found, I mean, this is your press release, everything is happening today. Today is an important date because it's also the day that in The Hague, we had the big news about Gaza. So it's like when, you know, in journalism, when there are two big news, then you don't know which one to put in first.
I would
Stefano,
like to know the date. Editor.
No. Well, but we want to know the date of when Guterres knows this and when. So if he's just, you know, yesterday, I understand he came today. But if it was a week ago, why we find out today?
It was not a week ago. It was this week. Obviously, when these sorts of things happen, a number of member states and key donors also have to be briefed. That takes a little bit of time. We don't want those people who are supporting UNRWA and who will continue to support UNRWA, we don't want them to be surprised by reading your articles and finding out what happened. So we want to tell them. We want to tell them ahead of time.
Okay, better answer. So and then another thing, trying to already you answer, but I tried in this way. There is I think it was the best piece of art that there is in this building was given by United States and is by Norman Rockwell, and we all see it.
Yes,
and
beautiful.
Very beautiful. And that has a phrase, a biblical phrase on it.
Yeah, no, you don't need to show it to me, Deji. I know it well. Thank
don't, and I translate, maybe it's not the perfect translation, but I always think in Italian, exactly. Do unto
Yes,
others.
it's the golden rule. I've been in
Golden
this building
rules.
24
Okay.
years
Don't do,
almost
in
now.
Italian
I
we
know,
say don't non
and
fare
I knew
agli
the
altri
golden rule
quello
before I
che...
came here as
okay.
well, yeah.
Does the Secretary General think that what the International Court just said is basically could be inspired by this? Because today we are remembering we're remembering genocide.
Okay. Let's step back for a second. First of all, as you know, there are different time frames and calendars for different bodies in this organization. The calendar of the International Court of Justice is their calendar. They follow their own calendar. We have no insight into it. It's obviously, it has to start with when people put a case in front of it, and then they make their decision. They spoke today on a specific case. It is not for me to interpret the ruling of this case today as it applies to other cases. The court has ruled on other cases, on other, recently, just off my head, on Myanmar, on Ukraine. So the court does its thing, we do our thing.
No, but I'm sorry, you, or maybe I wasn't clear. The question about the date was more the question that I asked before. This is about if the Secretary General think that what was decided today can apply to the golden rule.
What was decided today was decided on the facts that were presented to it by both Israel and South Africa. Miss Lederer, and then Gabriel, and then we're all going to go home.
Okay. On numbers, we all know that UNRWA had 13,000
Correct.
people in Gaza. Do we know how many are still there and how many of them have still been working?
They're all, I think save perhaps for a few who were evacuated for medical reasons, the Palestinian staff in Gaza of UNRWA has stayed in Gaza, and it's 13,000. 153 of them have perished during this conflict. They're all working to the best of their ability to deliver humanitarian aid. Gabriel.
Thanks for coming back to me, Steph. Question not about the ICJ or UNRWA. On January 9th, thereabouts, so about 2.5 weeks ago, Antony Blinken announced a deal was reached to launch a UN-led assessment mission to the north of Gaza. Do you have an update on that, if that's happened? And I have a follow-up.
It has not happened.
Why not?
There's a conflict going on, and we haven't been. All the things that need for this to happen have not happened.
Okay, follow-up to that is Axios is reporting that President Joe Biden spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday, and in that call, reportedly, President Biden asked Netanyahu to allow a UN-led mission to the north of Gaza, and Netanyahu allegedly agreed. Do you know anything
Well, we
about
don't
this?
monitor the conversations between the Prime Minister and the President.
Fair enough.
So we hope that the outcome of that conversation will be greater humanitarian access and that the mission will go forward.
Do you know if this was part of that from January 9th, though? Don't know. Okay.
Got to talk to somebody with an eagle seal instead of a UN seal in front of the podium. Go ahead, Josie.
This is on Afghanistan.
Yes, ma'am.
Envoys conference, I think it
Yep.
is mid-December. Is that a
Yeah.
UN conference, UN-led conference?
It's a follow-up meeting of all the Afghan envoys from member states and regional organizations. I mean, it's people coming together. We obviously have an important role in organizing it. And it'll be in Doha, 18 to 19 February.
So are any women, Afghan women involved?
Well, as part of the event, there will be collective meetings with the special envoys, including with Afghan women representatives, civil society representatives. But as we get closer to the date, we'll share more details.
Can I just ask one question about the 145 Palestinians who have been killed by Israeli Defense Forces?
153 UNRWA
53,
members. Yeah.
okay, sorry. Does the UN approach Israel and ask for reparations?
I think once this conflict is over, as it has been in cases in different, there will be boards of inquiry and the like. Okay, thank you. Happy Friday.